Hello, everyone. I'm Dean Glass, and I welcome you to Penning the Past, Insights into San Diego's Historic Neighborhoods and Architecture. Today, we have the privilege of exploring the rich legacy of one of San Diego's most iconic communities, Point Loma. From its strategic military significance to its renowned sport fishing and stunning vistas, Point Loma's storied past is as captivating as its beautiful peninsula setting. Guiding us on this historical journey are two exceptionally qualified locals with deep ties to Point Loma and San Diego. Eric DuVall is a prolific writer, photographer, and community leader whose multifaceted career has traversed numerous industries. A Point Loma High alumnus, Eric's love for his hometown shines through his extensive civic engagement. He founded the University Heights Community Development Corporation, co-founded the University Heights Community Association, and currently serves as president of the Ocean Beach Historical Society. Joining Eric is Kitty McDaniel, a lifelong San Diegan who grew up experiencing the wonder of Pacific Beach in the 1960s and 70s. After earning her teaching credentials from San Diego State, Kitty enjoyed an accomplished 35-year career educating young minds. Today, her passion lies in preserving local heritage as president of the La Playa Trail Association while actively researching the annals of our beloved city. Prepare to be immersed in Point Loma's extraordinary tale as told by two of its most devoted ambassadors. And if you have any questions, please type them into the chat feature, and Eric and Kitty will answer them after the presentation. And now, please join me in welcoming Eric DuVall and Kitty McDaniel.
All right. Well, good morning, Kitty.
Good morning, Eric.
Today, we're going to tell you a little bit about Point Loma and about the Point Loma book authored by La Playa Trail Association a few years ago in 2016. I'm Eric DuVall from Ocean Beach Historical Society.
Hi, I'm Kitty, and I've always been really interested in San Diego history, but I got especially interested in Point Loma history when I purchased a funny little redwood cabin right smack in the middle of Roseville Heights, which is a neighborhood of Point Loma. And after some research, I found out that my land was actually part of an old chicken farm that was in Chicken Ranch Canyon, nestled into what is present-day Talbot Street. So that's how my interest in Point Loma history came about. I don't know what to say.
Go ahead.
We're going to talk a little bit about La Playa Trail, of which I am president. La Playa Trail is the oldest commercial trail in the western United States. It stretches all the way from Ballast Point out on the government land, goes along Rosecrans Street, and then through Old Town, and ends up down at the San Diego Mission de Alcala. And it is the trail is partially still there, but part of it is street. This picture shows the Chinese fishing monument, which is where part of the trail goes. This is at the foot of Talbot Street, and it commemorates the Chinese fishermen that were once in Point Loma in the 1850s. So as you can see, the little trail starts way out at Ballast Point and then goes along the La Playa neighborhood all the way into Old Town and then out to the Mission. And in 2005, a group of Point Loma residents started a nonprofit organization called La Playa Trail. The group replaced, restored, and added new trail markers. La Playa Trail Association is still very active, hosting ongoing historical lectures and series every other month, and of course, writing the Point Loma book. The reason that the trail is so important is because back in the day, sailing vessels couldn't really land in San Diego Bay. It was too shallow. So the large sailing vessels would land at Ballast Point. They would then unload their cargo. And in order to get it from the Ballast Point out to Old Town, which was really actually New Town, which was the downtown San Diego, they would have to hoist their cargo onto ox-driven carts and go along this dusty old trail out to Old Town. Also, many, many years before Spanish explorers and vessels came from other places, the Kumeyaay used this trail. They would start, of course, out here where they were living, and they would come along La Playa Trail out to the coast to have their summer camping and to do their shell fishing and fishing.
All right.
So come with us as we explore Point Loma.
Yeah, we're going to take a little ride around the point here. This is the government road out to the lighthouse in the early days. And I wish I still had that car.
That was a good car, Eric. I like that car.
All right.
Can't see it all.
That's okay. In the 1880s, most of the eastern shore of Point Loma was barren, basically, and beach, and used by the locals as a fun picnic area. And throughout our history, the development of Point Loma has been closely tied to our unique geographical location guarding the entrance to San Diego Bay. And here's some folks on the beach at La Playa in about 1880. These two early charts show, this is the chart from the Vizcaíno edition that shows what they called La Punta de la Loma, or the point of the hill, which is what they call Point Loma. This is a 1602 sketch from the Vizcaíno expedition. And on the right is a chart from the Spanish settlement of San Diego in 1769, which shows the beach where we saw our picnickers there at Ballast Point. And then when the U.S. military took over the southern end of Point Loma, which was basically when California became a state in 1850, Ballast Point became off limits to the public as a beach for picnickers. And then show that little estero, Kitty. So this little estero up here, you see a couple islands in the bay. That was the mouth of the San Diego River in those days. And so at different times during San Diego's history, the river has emptied into San Diego Bay part of the time and into what we now call Mission Bay at other points in history. And we'll come back to that. That figures in our story a little bit later. Aboard a sailing ship in 1830-something, I can't see that, Richard Henry Dana was on a ship that landed at Ballast Point, and he spent 2 years tanning and loading hides to be shipped to the East Coast. His memoirs of this journey are recorded in his classic 2 Years Before the Mast, which every little kid at Dana Junior High, Richard Henry Dana Junior High used to have to read. At least we did in the 60s.
It's interesting to note that Richard Henry Dana, in his book, he does mention La Playa Trail. He talks about unloading his cargo and going along this dusty trail.
That's correct. Okay.
The Ballast Point Lighthouse was built because it became evident, it became evident that the first lighthouse that was built in Point Loma was not going to be efficient when there was fog. And if you live in Point Loma, you know that there's fog, well, most of the summer, at least May and June. So they built the Ballast Point Lighthouse, and it consisted of a 2-story wooden bell tower, a boathouse, and 2 dwellings, one of which was attached to a square wooden light tower. If you want to know more about the Ballast Point Lighthouse, there's a really, really good book called 3 Beams of Light, and it tells the story of a young girl who moved here with her family and grew up in this area at the lighthouse.
It's a good book.
It's a good book.
And this just shows some of the old buildings at Fort Rosecrans, and you can say this is La Playa Trail, right running through here. Some of these old buildings at Fort Rosecrans are still there, but you're lucky to be able to get on the base these days. Just looking north along the eastern side of the point.
As you leave Ballast Point, you will come to the first neighborhood just north of it, north of the government land. This is called La Playa. And this neighborhood, this picture's taken in about, it says right there, 1913. And this neighborhood became very popular with the Portuguese. Their community was down here at the foot of McCall Street, and it was quite a settlement. They had a little store there and everything, but La Playa is now a very exclusive, I would say exclusive neighborhood in Point Loma.
All right. What do we got?
We're going. And then continuing along the Playa Trail, you're heading north. You come to the town of Roseville, which was settled by Lewis Rose, who was about in the 1850s. He was a Jewish immigrant. He came to this place and he saw that it was a really prime place to start a downtown of San Diego, perhaps the hub of the commerce and everything. He thought he would do that along San Diego Bay. However, across the town, there was a man named Alonzo Horton who beat him to this, which I am really glad he did, because otherwise Point Loma would be downtown San Diego, and I probably wouldn't want to live here. So Mr. Rose, when he was here, he built a Jewish cemetery, he built a wharf, and he built, what else did he build?
Build a hotel.
Oh, an old hotel, which we have no pictures of, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's Lewis Rose on the left. On the right, you see some early pioneers. This is Frank Jennings and his wife Inez. Now, Frank's brother, Fred, is the one who had the poultry farm, the chicken farm, where my house now sits.
That's not Granny and Uncle Jed?
Well, it looks like, yeah, it looks kind of like them. But Frank Jennings was one of San Diego's first sheriffs. And he, not only did he buy land in Point Loma, he bought land all over Point Loma and Ocean Beach. The Jennings house, their house where they live, still stands on Rosecrans Street. Here you see a photo of it, of course, and then a painting of it. This is where Frank Jennings raised his family. They say, there is a rumor that there was once a jail cell in this house, because if Frank, the sheriff, arrested anybody in Roseville, or more likely La Playa during that time, it was too hard to bring them downtown to the jail if it were nighttime. So they say there was a jail cell in this house. You can still come to this house. After it was Frank Jennings' house, it became a lot of things. It was a sweet shop, an art gallery, a boarding house for fishermen, a yarn and gift shop, a coffee house. Now it is the Jennings House Eatery, and you really should go visit this place to get a good meal. And La Playa Trail Association has adorned the walls with lots of history that you're hearing here now, and lots of other historical photos.
So there's a big history room on the ground floor at Jennings' house. Come by and check that out.
Come by and check that out. In the late 1800s, right here in Roseville, Charles Bessemer and Charles Eames built a large nail factory right on the edge of the bay there. The nail factory, it was huge. It was huge. And people say they still find, people who live on this land in their yards, they still find the old-fashioned nails if they go digging. But the nail factory did not do very well. It closed down. Frank Jennings and his partner, George Crippen, bought the building, and they used it as a school, a church, a community meeting place. Visible in the picture, you can see the Jennings house, Frank Jennings' house, right there. And then his partner, George Crippen, lived across Canyon Street. That house is no longer there.
Didn't you find one of those old square nails in your yard?
Yes, yes, when they were doing some roofing.
Yeah.
Anyway. Now we are looking west, kind of the opposite direction that we were just looking. And this is the wharf.
Jennings' house again.
Oh, there's the Jennings house again. This is the wharf that was built by Lewis Rose way back in the early 1850s. And passenger ferries from Newtown and Coronado would bring visitors. They called it Roseville on the Bay, which sounds so romantic.
Yeah.
Visitors could then take the Tally-Ho, which was a horse-driven wagon, up through Chicken Ranch Canyon, where my house is, and up to Catherine Tingley's Theosophical Society community. So when Frank Jennings, who was that early pioneer, when he got here, he realized it was really hard for people to get to Roseville from downtown, because you would have to come along Dutch Flats, which is where the airport is now, and it was often flooded. So it was not an easy trek. So Frank Jennings decided to build a ferry called the Roseville, which would ferry the passengers from downtown San Diego right across San Diego Bay to the wharf at Roseville. Frank Jennings also added to the wharf, he added the Point Loma Ferry Pavilion, which was a hopping place. I know, looking at these women, it doesn't really seem like that was the place to go, but it was. There were weddings, there were dances, all kinds of activities there.
These ladies dare you to step inside.
Right, right.
Right.
Kind of where the San Diego Yacht Club is now. So this looks a lot different than when we looked at the picture of the old nail factory. This is about a century later. This is looking toward La Playa and Roseville. And this day is a Dutch shoe marathon where you see hundreds of sailboats, but it definitely looks a lot different. Just north of Talbot Street, actually at the bottom of Talbot Street and a little bit north, is the home of the San Diego Yacht Club. And here we can see the yacht club being relocated from Glorieta Bay in Coronado and floated over to its new location in Point Loma.
It happened in 1934. And we know a guy, Jim Baker, he says this is his dad standing on that float, floating over with those buildings.
That's pretty cool.
Okay. There we go. Okay. The Portuguese have been an important part of the community of Point Loma in and around the bay for many years. And this is a photo of the Belle of Portugal, typical tuna clipper bait boat. This one built in 1937 by Campbell Machine Company in San Diego. The Belle of Portugal was owned by the Manuel Rosa family, and she served her country during World War II as Navy vessel YP-321. So it's sort of an interesting story. A large portion of the tuna fleet was drafted into the Navy following Pearl Harbor. This was the crew of the Azoriana YP-292 during World War II. Because the tuna boats had refrigerated holds, they could hold a lot of fish. They were seen as ideal vessels for ferrying supplies around the South Pacific. And the tall guy here, fourth from the right, is actually my dad, who's on the crew of the Azoriana and the Picoroto during World War II. This depicts a very early festa parade from the United Portuguese SES Hall up what used to be known as Addison Street to St. Agnes Church. The hall itself dates back to 1922, but the festa, known as technically the Festa do Espírito Santo, or Feast of the Holy Spirit, is the oldest religious celebration in San Diego, going back over 100 years to the arrival of the first Portuguese settlers. It's a very special weekend. It was just a couple weeks ago this year. Wonderful festivities in Point Loma, and a great opportunity to appreciate the pride of the Portuguese community. It's an old festa parade. And then, I don't know how you do that. And this shows the capella, or the chapel, and the original SES hall. I found out that they call it United Portuguese SES, which means Sociedade de Espírito Santo, the Society of the Holy Spirit. This hall was built in the 20s, and it was rebuilt in the 50s. It's a great big hall now. It still hosts all kinds of things, including Congress of History for many years, convention there, bingo nights, all festa, weddings, dances, everything else happens at the SES hall. But they were Portuguese here from all parts of Portugal and from the islands of Madeira, from the island of Pico and the Azores, etc. So United Portuguese refers to all those folks from very different parts of Portugal in that area coming together in this country.
A lot of people still call that Portuguese community in Roseville, a lot of people still call it Tunaville.
Right.
And they changed, did you already say this? You may have already said this. They changed the name of the street from Addison Street to Avenida de Portugal.
I don't think I said that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Good.
San Diego is a Navy town, and lots of people trained at the Naval Training Center. This shows sailors relaxing on the base of the Naval Training Center. This base was closed in 1997, and now it has taken on a new life as Liberty Station. Liberty Station is what I call a Disneyland for grown-ups. So it's hard to believe that it was once a naval training center, because now it has all kinds of things. The creative reuse of the base retained many of the mission revival buildings designed by architect Walter Stevenson. Now it offers a marketplace, schools, restaurants, art studios and venues, homes and parks. It's really pretty. And I think they did a good job.
Did a great job.
Yeah, because they kept a lot of the old sidewalks and things like that.
Yeah. So the Naval Training Station, as it was originally known, was opened in 1923.
I often think when I'm here, I often think of these sailors who this was maybe the last time they were alive and saw San Diego. So it's kind of a sacred place.
Right.
Luce Auditorium was the place where there were shows and movies. And here you see a picture of Bob Hope. In 1941, there's Bob, when he presented 2 shows as part of his programs at West Coast Army posts and Navy bases. The auditorium is now a favorite neighborhood movie house, which you may have gone to. It's called The Lot.
This just shows, this is Luce Auditorium here during the war, 1945. You can see the buildings are painted in sort of a camouflage thing because they didn't know when there was going to be another airstrike. And then this shows you what this looks like today. The building in the middle with the glass here, that's the Lot Theater. They built that added on to Luce Auditorium. And so it's commercial movie house now in Liberty Station. Okay, you've probably seen the USS Recruit if you've driven along Harbor Drive at the south end of the former Navy base. She was commissioned as a training vessel in 1949, decommissioned in 1969, and reconditioned in 1982 as an updated training guided missile frigate. Over 50,000 recruits have trained on the USS Recruit over the years. She's a California registered historical landmark. And I would like to say that I never heard this boat called the USS Never Sail. In my childhood, it was always known as the USS Never Sink. At least that's the way I heard it. But this is the Recruit is open on the weekends typically, and you can tour at least the downstairs, and they have a lot of great photos of the USS Recruit through the years. Kind of a cool, unique building structure. Okay. Bingo. 1914, you would have found the Point Loma Golf and Country Club, also known as the San Diego Country Club, just north of the Naval Training Center. And this was built by sporting goods magnate Albert G. Spalding in 1914 or 1915. And the building was demolished, sadly, only about 5 years later when the Navy took part of the club's golf course for military purposes. So the Point Loma Golf and Country Club was there before NTC was there. The remaining 9-hole golf course, which is now known as a Loma Club and was for years called Sail Ho, is a remnant of this building.
And
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, take a good look at the architecture, because you're going to see some other architecture that looks similar to this when we talk about the Theosophical Society.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. And near this location in 1915 was part of the site of the great road race. And this was an event that they held in conjunction with the Panama, California Exposition. Over 6,000 bleacher seats were erected along Rosecrans to see the world's fastest car race drivers in a 305-mile road race through the hills of Point Loma. Legends such as Rickenbacker, Oldfeld, etc., drove Stutzes, Duesenbergs, and Maxwells for over 6 hours, thrilling over 50,000 spectators along the course. And here's what that looks like today. It's the same curve.
And the drivers still go about that fast.
That's true.
Along this street.
Exactly. This is just Chatsworth Boulevard going through Loma Portal in that photo. This shows you a map of the road race. There's this long straightaway along Rosecrans, uplit in here. This is where we showed you those photos along Chatsworth Boulevard, all the way up to Catalina, down to Talbot, down to Canyon Street, and back down to Rosecrans. And this right. Oh, we already changed the slide. Well, that's okay. How'd that happen? So this is the start and finish of that race. Here comes Eddie Rickenbacker roaring past the grandstand in the fabulous 1915 road race. All right. Oh, here's Point Loma High. Of course, took them right past what would eventually become Point Loma High School, the third oldest high school in the city, dedicated in 1925. The original buildings were demolished in the 70s as part of the earthquake safety requirements. They were what was called pre-Field Act buildings. These are beautiful buildings of the auditorium and what used to be the main building. They had a very difficult time tearing those buildings down. They were so strong and heavy duty, and I couldn't find the photo I had of them trying to tear down those beautiful old buildings.
Beautiful.
Okay. Okay. And our route continues through along the top of the point to Madam Tingley's fabulous theosophical community known as Loma Land. So Loma Land dated from right about 1900. Some of the original buildings are still there today, and they're on use of the campus of Point Loma Nazarene University. This is the Egyptian Gate on the southern entrance to Loma Land. Today, this is the corner of DuPont Avenue and Catalina Boulevard.
Tell the story of Point Loma, the calling it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in the old days, nobody ever referred to Point Loma as a community. There were several communities on Point Loma: Roseville, Ocean Beach, La Playa. But until the Theosophists came in 1900, nobody ever said they were going to Point Loma unless they meant they were going to Loma Land. So anyway, and the Greek theater at the time, I mean, the Egyptian Gate, I'm sorry, marked the road to the Greek theater. And here we see some little girls on the lawn at Loma Land. This is in about 1901. The Raja Yoga Academy started in 1900 with only, I think, 6 pupils. That's the Temple of Peace building there.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, and that's the the Homestead building here is also known as the Raja Yoga School, and it expanded as the years went by. It becoming a university in 1919. The glass domes, here's the Temple of Peace on the left, the Homestead building, also known as the Raja Yoga School, on the right. These domes were illuminated at night and were visible from downtown San Diego and even from ships at sea. Go ahead, Kitty.
People often wonder what became of those beautiful glass domes. Were they all purple?
No, they weren't. They were different
colors. Okay. There's only one left. You'll see it in a picture in a minute, but the theory that I have heard is that around about the time the military started flying past Loma Land, I guess because they were trying to break the sound barrier, it could have cracked the domes. They could have been destroyed that way.
Anyway, they didn't fare too well when the Second World War came. Okay. And Loma Land was a self-contained community. Here, a bunch of cattle grazed on the property in 1905, and over 100 acres were cultivated by the Theosophical Society on Point Loma, and some olive trees, and actually a number of specimen trees planted by the community still remain.
Is that Al Spalding's house?
Oh yeah, here we go. So here's Al Spalding's house, known as Mieres Hall, now on the campus of Point Loma Nazarene. This house over here, the North House, is also still there. They call that the President's House now. And I call this photo Catalina Cattle. It's right along Catalina Boulevard. They're raising cattle. They had a dairy farm, and pretty interesting setup.
Some people referred to Loma Land as utopia because it was this incredible place with incredible foliage, incredible buildings, and it was all self-contained.
Yeah. Here is Catherine Tingley. She had become the head of the Universal Brotherhood and Theosophical Society, and she moved the headquarters of the society from New York City out to Point Loma in 1900. They say it opened February 13th, 1900. They came a couple years before that. But she steered the society toward international humanitarianism, traveling widely and coordinating the society's relief efforts for refugees campaigning against World War I. As a young girl, she had a vision of what she referred to as a white city on a hill in a golden land above the Pacific. She envisioned a place where people from all countries could come together and young people would learn to be true and strong and noble. She chanced to share that vision with General John C. Fremont, who you might have heard of, who told her he knew the place she described, a peninsula called Point Loma. Madam Tingley built an amazing community on the site, including the first Greek theater in the United States. The theater has been the site of graduations for Cal Western University, Point Loma High School, and the current occupants of the property, Point Loma Nazarene University. And this is the back of the Doric Stoa at the Greek Theater at Loma Land. And here's Madam Tingley in her office at Loma Land.
This is a view of a favorite neighborhood in Point Loma that during Catherine Tingley's time, they called it the Woodlands. People now call it the wooded area because it contains a lot of foliage and trees from the Theosophical Society. It's east of Catalina Boulevard, south of Talbot Street, and extends to the military base to the south. If you ride your bike or run along there, it really feels like you're in the woods. And in this same area, in the wooded area, in 1903, Alfred and Marion Robinson bought a barley field from the Theosophical Society. And this barley field became known as Rosecroft, and soon it became home to the famous Rosecroft begonia gardens. The gardens prospered as a commercial nursery until the 1970s, and apparently the begonias they grew there were just fantastic.
They were.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
This is the estate of Alfred and Marion Robinson, which is still there. It's on Silvergate Avenue. It's been declared historical, and I heard that the stone wall around it has also been declared as historical. In my mind, it was unfortunate that those gardens were at some point in the 1980s subdivided, and now you will just find large houses on them. But this estate still does exist.
It's still there.
And it's incredible.
Yeah. Okay. So the San Diego River has, as I mentioned, changed its course a number of times over the millennia. And during the hundreds of years that it was emptying into San Diego Bay, the silt and sand that were deposited from the river built up onto this sandbar you see right here. The sandbar, some people called it an island. This photo is from 1934. But this part of the bay the entrance to San Diego Bay was eventually dredged shortly after NTC was put in, and to make the bay deeper so large Navy ships could get in and so forth. And so the spoils from that dredging built up the sandbar to create Shelter Island and paved the way for the hotels, restaurants, marinas, yacht clubs, and parks that we enjoy today.
If you talk to some old timers, they will tell you they can remember when they would either swim out from Kellogg's Beach, swim out to the island, or row their little boats out and have a picnic on the sandbar. And I think it's interesting that at really high tide, you couldn't even see the sandbar.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was there. Sometimes it was two islands.
Sometimes it was two islands. Yeah. Of course, it was. It came and went. And part of the time it was considered a navigational hazard, and now it's recreation area of San Diego. Okay, and this is 1950. This shows them attaching what became Shelter Island. This is what is known as Byron Street, still is up the hill, but Shelter Island Drive onto Shelter Island. That's very early days.
So that's like the end of it is where the Kona Kai is.
Yeah.
Valley High's at the other end.
Yep. Okay.
Go ahead.
Is this me? Okay. Recreational boating is a huge thing on Point Loma, but who knows if it would have developed the way it has without the emergence of the Kettenberg family. Pictured here in their backyard in La Playa with one of their first builds. As the harbor was dredged, creating Shelter Island, they established a boatyard there with the tradition of boat building that has lasted over 100 years. It's a big concern, and they really developed a lot of it, not just sailboats, but power boats, boats for the Navy, etc. Here's the Kettenberg Boat Works in La Playa. Go ahead, Kitty.
The story is that the Kettenbergs would build their boats in their yard. Like Eric said, they lived on Kellogg, which is a steep hill. Then they would just roll the boats down to the water to test them out.
Yeah. One of the earliest buildings to be built on Shelter Island is the Bali High restaurant. And it's a classic of what's known as Polynesian modern and/or atomic tiki style architecture. That was a trademark of the island in the early years. And after several changes in ownership, Tom Ham bought the restaurant, and his family has provided hospitality and fabulous views for over 50 years. This guy is called the Goof on the Roof. Go ahead, Kitty.
If you were to go down to the Bali High right now today and look at the top of the Goof on the Roof's head, there's a beautiful osprey nest. The baby ospreys just left, but it's there every year. And I think it's interesting also that this was originally called Christian's Hut, in honor of Fletcher Christian and Mutiny on the Bounty.
Right. And this is just to show you that, following World War II, the whole tiki thing was a very big deal in the U.S. And Shelter Island was really ground zero for Polynesian modern style architecture. There's the tiki tram and so forth. Very interesting period in our architecture. Some of it has been replaced, sadly, along Shelter Island, but a lot of it remains. Generations of Portuguese fishermen sailed past Shelter Island on their way to the canneries along La Playa, and dedicated in 1988, the Tunamen's Memorial on Shelter Island honors those who built the industry as well as those lost at sea. And this is on the along the shore of Shelter Island.
So here we are at the end of our trail, and this picture shows some young boys examining our image that shows a Mexican carreta and the ox that's pulling it. It's one of the 6 trail markers erected. This was back in 1934. In 2010, La Playa Trail Association undertook the restoration of this monument as our first project. In the ensuing years, we have dedicated several more markers and created the book these pictures are drawn from. We really enjoy sharing the history of Point Loma through our bi-monthly lecture series at the historic Point Loma Assembly Hall on Talbot Street. We didn't show you a picture of the historic Point Loma Assembly Hall, but there's a whole story that goes with that. It has to do with Frank Jennings, that early pioneer. We welcome you to join us with us at www.laplayatrail.org.
Right. Here's where this is the same monument, by the way, relocated here right by TJ Maxx and Sprouts over there. At Midway. This one's at Midway and Rosecrans. Okay, and this shows you. Here's 3 of the other monuments along La Playa Trail. This one on the left is at the foot of Presidio Hill on Taylor Street. The one in the middle is just inside the gate of Fort Rosecrans, and this one on the right is right at Avenida de Portugal and Rosecrans on Rosecrans Street in Point Loma.
And that's my dog.
That's Kitty's dog. And then La Playa Trail Association have done these historic walks of Roseville a couple times. We take people around the community and show them some of these landmarks that we've showed you in this little talk. We've done this a couple of times. And I would like to invite you folks to join us on the 20th of June at Ocean Beach Historical Society, when we're going to have a couple of the guys from Soho joining us for a program on historic preservation. It's going to be a Q&A, basically, with Bruce Coons and David Goldberg from Soho at OB Historical Society. It'll be 7 p.m. on the 20th at Water's Edge in OB at Saratoga Avenue and Sunset Cliffs Boulevard. Always free. Everyone's welcome. Come on down.
We talked a little bit about our La Playa Trail bi-monthly series, and we are having a lecture the same, well, actually June 22nd, and it's going to be Dr. Sandy Bonura. She wrote the book about John D. Spreckles, and now she's written a book about John D. Spreckles' father, Klaus Spreckles, called The Sugar King. And if you didn't know, the Spreckles were very important in San Diego.
Yeah, that'll be on the 22nd, Saturday the 22nd. Oh, yeah. And also, that is the same day as the Ocean Beach Street Fair. So you're all invited out to the street fair. If you come on down, come look for our booth, OB Historical Society. We are right by Hodad's on Newport on the north side of the street, typically. So come see us at the Ocean Beach Street Fair. And that about wraps it up, Dean.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eric and Kitty. That was great. Very interesting. Very interesting lecture. We do have some questions from our viewers.
All right.
Thank you. Let's start with this one. Who was Kellogg Street and Kellogg Beach named after?
There you go, Kitty.
They're actually alphabetical, starting from Jenkins, which is just to the south of Kellogg's, and they were named after Navy admirals or important people in the Navy. So they are alphabetical all the way from J all the way to Perry, Qualtrough, all the way to Qualtrough. All of them named after important naval officers or people.
Yeah.
Great.
Good job.
How competitive were the various fishermen for their catch? Was there enough for everyone?
I would say there was enough for everyone, yeah, but very, very competitive. And in the early days, these boats didn't go too far. You know, we have a lot of other photos I'm not sharing of the way the boats developed over the years. But they would sometimes, as the boats got a little bit bigger, they would go into Mexican waters. Depending on the size of the boat, the boats would be manned by either, early, just like two guys, small sloops, what they call Monterey style fishing boats. And I'm sorry, I don't have any photos to show you today. But then as the catches got bigger, the boats got bigger, and the boats ventured further and further south and north along the coast. But yeah, there was always, not always, but generally plenty of fish.
I've heard it was very competitive in the early 1850s between the Chinese and the Portuguese, because the Chinese had these huge Chinese junks. If you had looked out on the bay, you would have just seen all Chinese junks. And I have read that it was quite competitive at that point.
It was, and there are also a number of Japanese commercial fishermen fishing out of San Diego in the years before World War II. And a lot of their boats moved to Mexico after the war broke out. So that was another large component of the fishing fleet in San Diego.
We have a comment here. It says that the Dutch shoe sailboats were called sabots.
They're called
sabots.
Habits.
Sabot. Yeah. Those are little small sailboats between like 7 and 9 feet long. They have one sail, and an adult can sit in one just barely.
And you see it down at the Southwestern Yacht Club starting, well, since school's out, so starting Monday, all the kids take sailing lessons in those little sabots.
Yeah,
you see them out there in their boats, and they're just having a ball.
Yeah, so it's a very entry-level sailboat for kids to learn to sail, basically.
Oh, great. And can you tell us what a Chinese junk is?
Oh, a Chinese junk was an old fishing vessel. They were big. The sails were made out of like the rice paper, and they were rigged almost like an old brigantine. I might not be naming the right boat, but they were big boats that you don't see anymore. They're gone.
They had two masts.
Two masts, yes.
Yeah, they were built
square rig. They were square rig. That's what I was trying to say.
Quite a few of them were built in La Playa, and there were a number of them around. At one time, there were at least 7 on San Diego Bay.
Oh, no. There was like 18 of them.
18 of them. Okay. How about that?
So where they went, we don't know.
Yeah, there are some old photos of them. Wasn't there? Didn't you say there was one on in Mission Bay in the old days?
Yes, when I was a kid, we had our boat docked at the Islandia, and there was a Chinese junk there that somebody lived on.
Yeah.
Really, really neat looking boats.
Great. It looks like we don't have any more questions. If anybody has any, please type them into the chat feature or even the Q&A, and we'll get right to those. Otherwise, in the meantime, do you have anything you'd like to add, Eric or Kitty?
Anything you'd like to add, Kitty? I was just going to say this is a funny thing that this lecture was scheduled for the same day as the Ocean Beach Street Fair. Whoops! But but on the other hand, we figure it might be a different audience. So yeah. So anyway,
and I have lots of neat little anecdotes and funny, weird stories about different things in Point Loma, but they're kind of like passed down through oral history. So I'm not sure if they're all true, but that's my favorite part of researching.
Yeah. I'm going to mention just briefly the program that Bruce Coons and David Goldberg are doing for Ocean Beach Historical Society is a Q&A about historic preservation. And there are some concerns in the Ocean Beach community about preserving some of our old buildings and in general, trying to preserve the character of the neighborhood. So we have an old, what's called a emerging historic cottage district in Ocean Beach. And the city is trying to make an end run around that in many cases. And so we're hoping the guys from Soho can shed some light onto the ins and outs of that process. But so bring your questions for Bruce and David to OBHS on the 20th. What else, Kitty? What else you got?
I have a couple more questions if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Okay, whoops. Looks like they're coming in now. Okay. The area is very rich in military history. Do you have any records of where the residents of upper-ranking military lived?
Where they live?
Where
You
they
know,
lived.
well, it's interesting because there are four officers' quarters that were built along Rosecrans Street, right down at Lytton, or just south of the golf course, actually, along Rosecrans at NTC.
North of
And
golf.
what's
That's-
that?
No, never mind, nothing.
Yeah, and those were some of the first buildings built there, actually, and they're really, beautiful, Spanish Revival style homes there that were for commissioned officers on the base. And then a lot of the other officers lived, close by in Loma Portal as the base grew over the years. I mean, the base started very small, but
Lots of big homes right across from Liberty Station,
Yeah.
across Rosecrans Street, beautiful old homes.
yeah. And in the neighborhood that's known as Loma Portal. And so, but at least one of those, the former officers' quarters, is like a store or something now. Is it like a shop? Something
it's a
else. It
school.
was
I
it
don't
was
know.
it was like a gift shop for a while, but a couple of them are just boarded up. So they haven't done anything with two or three of them yet at this point. But they have beautiful yards, big yards, grounds and stuff, and they were right next to the golf course down there. What else? Yeah. All right.
Okay, we did that one. Somebody says, I realized the airport's history would be another story, but I just want to know when it was first established.
Boy, that's a pretty good question, because before, most of what is the San Diego International Airport today is built on fill. So a lot of that property was all water in the old days.
Which is why they had to have the ferry come across the bay instead of go around, instead
Yeah.
of driving around.
And a lot of the boats docked right there at like the foot of like Laurel Street. Where the Coast Guard station is now, all that is fill. So there's a big, very low-lying area between, downtown and Point Loma, heading out toward Mission Bay, that was originally known as Dutch Flats. And they think that in the very old days, maybe the prehistoric days, Point Loma may have actually been an island, a rocky island when the seas were higher. And all of that area that is, became Mission Bay through the Midway district, if you think about it, it's all very low-lying land. And there was a lot of water in there up until, the turn of the 20th century. There was still a lot of land up there when they built the Naval Training Center in the 1920s. So that area of Dutch Flats, since it was so flat, was home to, among other things, the Ryan Flying School. And so just right across from NTC, across Lytton Street, where St. Charles Church is now, in that area, that used to be the Ryan Flying School. And so a lot of planes landed there and took off there. A lot of people learned to fly there. And that's really why the San Diego airport ended up being located where it was. People were used to planes flying in and out of there. It was a nice flat place. And so when they built Shelter Island, when they added on to the land where NTC is, they built up a lot of that land too. So the park that runs along the what's called the boat channel there between NTC and the airport, a lot of that was built up. So the land that the Navy bought from San Diego, about half of it was actually underwater when they built it. And then they developed that land.
When they bought it.
Yeah, when they bought it. And as they dredged the bay to make the deeper channels, they built up that area, and they built up the area where the San Diego International Airport is now. So, but I don't think it opened as an airport until the 30s. Yeah. So Bennett just got bigger and bigger and outgrew the space, obviously. So it's always a little hairy coming into San Diego, in my opinion.
I have a couple of comments too. In the early 70s, when I first came to San Diego, there were tuna boats tied along the Embarcadero, and you could see crew members sitting on the Embarcadero mending the fishing nets Tuna fishing involved early on long line fishing, then transitioned to seiner nets.
Mhm.
Yeah, seiner. So how they say that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I guessed.
That was a good guess.
Yep.
And I have, let's give a shout out to the women who founded Point Loma Assembly and who meet and do good works from there today.
That's right. Very good. Thank you.
They do
Yeah.
great work.
Okay.
Let me see. My first visit to San Diego was as a guest of the commanding officer of NTC,
Oh, wow.
Family Navy friends. So I stayed in the officers' quarter.
Oh,
Hmm.
And it says Barnett Street was previously Tide Street because of the
Right.
flood.
that's true.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's neat.
that's a good one. I'll tell you guys a story if you want to hear a story.
Oh,
When Congressman Kettner, our famous congressman, brought the Undersecretary of the Navy, a guy named Franklin D. Roosevelt, out to San Diego in right about 1920. They were riding along Pacific Avenue, which we now, I'm sorry, Atlantic Avenue, which we now call Pacific Highway. And this is just a story, but supposedly FDR said, Congressman, why is this street called Atlantic? Isn't that the Pacific Ocean right out there? And he said, yes, sir, it is. And so shortly thereafter, they changed the name to Pacific Avenue, and then later Pacific Highway. They were trying to butter up the Undersecretary of the Navy too. That's an excellent suggestion, sir. Right, you are. So anyway, you see it on old maps, Atlantic and so forth.
Yeah, I never knew that.
There you go. There you go, Dean.
Oh, somebody is writing that also amusing is that Kettner Boulevard was originally Arctic Street.
There was, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Kettner was Arctic. That's right. Were those streets alphabetical down there? I don't know.
think so.
Anyway, yeah, I in streetcar talk I do, I have the streetcars coming around the corner at the corner of D and Arctic, and I ask people what that is today, and of course it's Broadway and Kettner. But anyway, yeah, very true.
Great. I think that is about it for our questions. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Kitty and Eric, for such an interesting lecture. I would also like to thank the fabulous Janet O'Day, our extraordinary volunteer whose work behind the scenes has made this lecture series possible. And thank you to our audience. We hope to see you next month on the second Saturday for Penning the Past, Insights into San Diego's Historic Neighborhoods and Architecture. Next up is La Jolla with Carol Olton. And remember that the books featured in this series can be purchased at the Marston House Museum shop. Thank you for your support of Soho and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you again, Eric and Kitty.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Dean.